This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Thousands marched in Washington today about a shutdown, but not the government, however. They want to end the abortion industry. Paul Strand reports now from the March for Life, which the president boosted today.
The pro-life movement, like all those gathered here for the March for Life, is vast, with people representing all sorts of interests and ideas inside of the movement.
And we gather here because we believe, as our founders did, that we are, all of us, born and unborn, endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and first among these rights is the right to life.
Vice President Pence also introduced a special guest.
This is a movement founded on love and grounded in the nobility and dignity of every human life. When we look into the eyes of a newborn child, we see the beauty and the human soul and the majesty of God's creation. We know that every life has meaning and that every life is worth protecting.
The president reiterated his support for the Hyde Amendment and other pro-life legislation.
I will always defend the first right in our Declaration of Independence, the right to life.
Brian Fisher of Human Coalition wants to see this administration do even more to tackle abortion, like how it's escalated the fight against opioids.
HHS, Health and Human Services, has just launched a 5-point plan to be able to combat the opioid addiction crisis, which unfortunately kills 115 people every day in the country. We support HHS's launching that plan. Our question is simply, abortion kills 3,000 preborn children a day. Where is the 5-point plan to end the leading cause of death in America?
Susanna Edwards let her outfit do the talking. She hopes people will look at her dress made of baby clothes and think of all the lives that ended before they could wear those little outfits.
All of this has been worn by a real baby, and there are many babies that won't get to this point. And so the natural reaction to baby clothes, people are, the awe and all of that, but I want that kind of the care and affection to be brought to the unborn child as well as the born child.
Elaine Webster wants women to avoid the pain she still feels decades later over her abortion and the counsel she got from a pro-choice doctor.
She told me that it was nothing more than a little sprouted wheat seed.
Her husband Barry still feels guilty about not trying to talk Elaine out of it and called out men who don't fight for their unborn babies.
The fact that I didn't support my wife really led to us making that decision. Stand up. It's our purpose to support our women.
27 students came here together from small Colorado Christian University, showing what an issue this is for young people today.
Just the fact of what abortion is and what it does to people. And so I think we're out here because we care for all of life, all of people.
Susie Oddie traveled from South Carolina for this march.
I have real heart for babies and people in general. They're all God's creation, and they should not be killed.
But her sister Joanne Gonzalez came all the way from California, saying abortion defies God's intent to create life.
Generation after generation, it's His plan, and we're thwarting it through abortion.
So much is on the line. Abortion is now the #1 cause of death. 42 million babies slaughtered across the world last year alone. That's 125,000 a day. That's why these people march, to end that. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the March for Life.
And joining us now with more is the president of Students for Life, Kristin Hawkins. So, Kristin, how are things going today? What was the turnout like?
The turnout was huge. We saw so many Students for Life leaders across the country, so many young people. It was amazing. We heard the vice president call out the pro-life generation on stage at the March for Life. That was an incredible moment. And so I think, I've been disappointed a little bit. I haven't seen as much media as I've seen in previous years. And so I'm a little bit worried how the media is going to portray this march today and how they're going to say what they're going to say. But really, the pro-life generation, the pro-life movement showed up just like we do every single year.
Is there anything different about this year's march than previous years?
Well, definitely, I think the government shutdown has impacted, like I said, a lot of the media coverage. A lot of people, are choosing not to cover the march. I think there's a lot more hope, too. You saw that you've got Justice Neil Gorsuch, Justice Brett Kavanaugh. I was just up at the Supreme Court, and there's a group about 50 pro-abortion protesters there. They came out, and they're angry, and they're mad, and they're and they know Roe is going to go away, and it's going to go away very soon.
What is the impact of the pro-life community and what you're hoping to have with this march?
Well, obviously, this march isn't going to save a life, right, today. Unless someone here right now in Washington, D.C. sees a sign, it's very hard to say, will this march save lives right here? But we know it's going to save lives because there's hundreds of thousands of young people who've come here today and who are going to go back home tomorrow. They're going to go back home Sunday after our national conference, and they're going to know that they're not alone, that they are a part of the pro-life generation, and that they can stand up, that they've stood up with hundreds of thousands of Americans, and they can do more. That's why I love this march, because everyone comes, gets excited, knows that they're not alone. They get reinvigorated. Tomorrow we have our national conference, so it's the world's largest pro-life conference, the Students' Life Conference, over 2,500 young people. So they march today. Tomorrow I will give them their marching orders for what to do when they go back home, and we're going to save lives.
Real quick, could you preview what you're hoping to accomplish this year?
What we're hoping to accomplish this year is to carry the momentum forward. We had a setback this year in the elections with the Democrats taking control of the House. And the Democratic National Committee's platform is an extremist platform, which our poll just showed the majority of millennials, 93% of millennials, are against the Democratic National Committee's platform of abortion whenever, wherever, and taxpayer funded. So we've had this setback, and things are going to be more challenging in Washington, D.C. But I'm hoping today people see that this is why they've been called to this moment. They've been called to this moment to stand up for those most vulnerable among us, that they can do it right in their communities, in their state houses, on their campuses. I hope the administration sees this, President Trump's administration, because there's more we've got to do, and there's promises that President Trump's made that we still need him to fulfill, and it's in his administration that's going to have to step up here, especially now with the divided Congress.
All right, Kristin Hawkins, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The ongoing U.S. government shutdown has left many essential departments closed, and one of those departments is running out of money, and that is the Immigration Court. The Executive Office for Immigration Review in Miami has closed. More than 40,000 immigration hearings have been canceled due to a funding shortage. Immigrants are being turned away, with a private guard being the only person that they get to talk to. One judge said, quote, "It is devastating as many immigrants are now in limbo."
For an administration that has put so much focus on the deportation machine and making sure cases are being moved quickly through the system, it's really impacted the immigration courts so severely, and all the federal employees involved. So it's really hugely problematic, for all of us. It's just increasing the tremendous backlog that we do already have.
Today is day 28 of the government shutdown as the president and Democrats continue to fight over his demand for that $5 billion for a border wall. Senator Lindsey Graham met with Turkey's president and other Turkish officials Friday to discuss the situation in Syria as the U.S. prepares to withdraw troops. This comes days after the suicide bombing by ISIS that killed 2 U.S. service members and 2 American civilians. Graham said he is concerned President Trump's withdrawal announcement has emboldened the Islamic State militants and created dangerous and uncertainty for American allies. Today's talks were also expected to include a proposal for the creation of a safe zone in northeast Syria. Israeli forces have demolished the family home of a Palestinian charged with fatally stabbing an American-Israeli settler several months ago. Israeli soldiers destroyed Khalil Jabreen's apartment with explosives after the family cleared out early Friday. The 17-year-old was accused of killing a U.S.-born settler activist at a mall in September. The military says dozens of Palestinians protesting the demolition hurled rocks toward Israeli soldiers. Israeli forces say they were then forced to respond with riot dispersal means, which usually refers to rubber-tipped bullets and tear gas. Israel claims home demolitions serve as a deterrent to potential attackers. The World Council of Churches calls itself broad and inclusive with the goal of Christian unity. A new report also claims the organization is behind a program to train young people in the West Bank as observers, then send them home as anti-Israel advocates. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us the story now from Jerusalem.
This effort is called the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel, or EAPPI. The World Council of Churches started the program in 2002. Since then, it's sent some 1,800 volunteers to the West Bank to witness what it calls Life Under Occupation. These volunteers then head home to tell churches, congregations, and others about it. Those presentations often take a very negative and even anti-Semitic tone.
It has got nothing to do with it. It is mainly a political warfare. It is mainly driven by the Zionists. It is a Zionist ideology to try and drive every Palestinian out of that land to create a Jewish state.
The WCC denounces anti-Semitism as a sin against God, and spokesperson Peter Prove tells CBN News that the program is all about human rights.
The ultimate purposes of the program are to address human rights violations, impacts upon human dignity, and to promote, on the positive side, a just peace for both peoples.
A report by the NGO Monitor, however, paints a different picture of these so-called training camps.
And that is the main tool for training anti-Israel activists within church organizations and churches around the world. And it's also the main tool for inserting anti-Israel and anti-Zionist propaganda and rhetoric into those same churches.
According to Prove, the volunteers take part in everyday life with the Palestinians.
They're there to provide a protective presence. Secondly, they're there to observe, monitor, and report on events that they observe.
Jonas Schiffmiller said, NGO Monitor found there's more to the story.
In fact, what EAPPI is really doing is coming here, gaining credibility for themselves to go back to their home churches and to spread anti-Israel diatribes.
Yosef Daher is coordinator of the Jerusalem Center that hosts the volunteers. He explains how they view Jesus' command to love your enemies.
We look at the Israelis, of course, back home as our enemy. And we see that our enemy is in a sin against God and against humanity. And in order to show our love, if you love someone, you would love him to be free of his sin. So this is where we connected love with resistance.
Resistance usually refers to terrorism, but Daher said as Christians they only promote boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, or BDS. In response to the report, the WCC said it only promotes boycotting goods from Israeli settlements. That's not Daher's view.
Our call for sanctions is targeted at Israel.
The WCC recognizes Israel's right to exist according to international law, but doesn't connect it to the Bible. Dr. Robert Smith works with the volunteers and explained it earlier.
The biblical narrative of Israel has almost nothing to do with contemporary Israel other than the intentional manipulation of sacred text to justify a political project. The Global Kairos movement declared that any Christian theology that supports Zionism is heresy.
David Parsons is vice president of the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. He described the 2009 Kairos Palestine Declaration as misguided.
For someone to brand Christian Zionism heresy, this is troubling ground because Jesus himself affirmed the restoration of Israel in Matthew 19. The Apostle Peter does it in Acts chapter 3, and Paul does it in Romans chapter 11. So these were all affirming a belief in biblical Zionism, the belief that the Jews would be restored to the land. So are you calling Jesus himself a heretic?
Funding for the volunteer training program comes from the World Council of Churches as well as European governments. NGO Monitor would like those countries to reevaluate that support and the WCC to recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
A massive swarm of locusts and cockroaches, an estimated 30,000, has descended on Mecca in Saudi Arabia. The Saudis took to social media showing the bugs flying in every direction and even swarming the walls and floors of the Great Mosque. The mosque officials said they had to deploy 22 sanitation teams to combat the pests, specifically targeting breeding and gathering sites, such as toilets and water drains. The Great Mosque in Mecca is the second largest in the world. Coming up, one lawmaker talks white supremacist and white nationalists and is called on it. Another supports anti-Semitism and isn't. Now a member of the national media calls out his own, a few leaders in Congress, for a double standard.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Is there a double standard among politicians and the media when it comes to condemning the words and actions of members of Congress? A recent sanctioning of Republican Representative Steve King of Iowa and the lack of the same with Democratic Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan has the Washington Examiner columnist Philip Klein asking questions. He joins us now with more on the piece. So, Philip, King says the New York Times misrepresented what he meant when he was discussing racism and the use of labels like white supremacist and white nationalist. I want to take a listen to a clip from Representative King in response to the article on the House floor. Take a listen.
So once again, I reject those labels and the ideology they define. And as I told the New York Times, it's not about race. It's never been about race. One of my most strongly held beliefs is that we are all created in God's image, and that human life is sacred in all of its forms.
Now, King said it was a 56-minute phone interview with the Times and his comments were misunderstood. Did the Times overreach in your estimation?
I mean, they quoted him as saying that, asking what was so offensive about the terms white supremacist and white nationalist, and those comments were deplorable. But I think what's, interesting is sort of what the reaction was, because when Steve King made those comments, he was widely condemned from the White House, from Republican leaders in the House and Senate, and the House leadership went about rejecting or stripping him of committee assignments. With regard to, however, when it comes to the Democratic side, Representative Rashida Tlaib, a new freshman Democrat, came in and has made a string of anti-Semitic statements. And forget about stripping her of committee assignments. She hasn't even been criticized by any Democrats who evidently are okay with anti-Semitism.
Have Republicans criticized or been critical of those statements?
Yes, there have been criticisms of the statements. I mean, Rashida Tlaib, basically, even in the few months since her election, she's come out in favor of the Boycott Israel movement. She defended Mark Lamont Hill, a CNN pundit who was fired after he made statements calling for the elimination of Israel from the river to the sea, and for defending the idea of violent resistance against Jews. She also came out and accused those supporting she said of those supporting an anti-PDS legislation, what country do you represent? Which brings up the old dual loyalty smear, which is one of the age-old attacks on Jews in this country, the idea that somehow they're not really loyal to their own country.
Now, you say she even posed for a picture with a Palestinian activist who has praised the terrorist group Hezbollah. Did that get the attention of the Democratic leadership or the media?
No, it did not. Yeah, she at a private reception celebrating her swearing in her home of Detroit. She was photographed with somebody who has a long history of being praising Hezbollah, saying Jews should, Israeli Jews should go back to Poland, where 3 million Jews were massacred during the Holocaust. And those are the type of people she's associating with. And when some of us reported on this, she lashed out at the right-wing media and said, I'm Palestinian and Muslim, deal with it. Which I found odd, because the suggestion there is what? That if she's Palestinian, of course, she supports Hezbollah activists. It doesn't particularly make sense to me. So again, what I think this comes down to is that Democrats have a festering problem with anti-Semitism within their own caucus. And we're seeing this play out right now in the Women's March, where the leadership of the Women's March has been virulently anti-Semite, yes, has praised Louis Farrakhan, and there's
we'll have
a
to let that be the
silence.
last. Yeah, we have to let we are out of time. Have to let that be the last word. Philip Klein, thank you for your insight.
Thank you.
Reading the Bible, because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
Japan is facing its highest suicide rate in 30 years. Lucille Toulousan brings us the story now from Tokyo.
Aiko Kudu still finds it hard to believe that her childhood friend committed suicide.
How can he take his own life and leave behind his family in misery? He got depressed when his mother did not approve the school of his choice. He ran away from home. After 3 days, he was found dead in a park restroom. He cut his wrist and bled to death.
The suicide rate among young Japanese has risen to its highest level in 3 decades. According to the Ministry of Education, 250 elementary and high school students committed suicide last year.
Reports say that based on the notes left by these kids, bullying is the main reason that pushed them to end their life.
Being part of a group is very important in our culture, and that is why if the child is different physically, he is always bullied.
Pastor Miyahara says people who take this route often lack purpose in life. Throughout history, Japan has lacked a dominant religion. Religion is perceived as tradition, not a way to find purpose. And religion is not a priority. Japanese seek other ways for fulfillment. Mina Kobuyi gives free hugs at the Shibuya train station.
I give free hugs because I want people to relax.
When asked what she knows about Jesus,
Jesus,
do you think religion is important?
Yes, but for me, it's not important.
Less than 1% of Japanese population is Christian. This is why Pastor Miyahara is committed to share the gospel. He preaches outside the train station each day as people head home from work.
Jesus commanded me to share the gospel, and that's what I do. Some stop and have a conversation with me. That's when I tell them about Jesus' love and sacrifice for them. And I also get the opportunity to lead them to prayer.
Pastor Miyahara believes Christ can solve the suicide problem by helping desperate people find hope and a reason to live. Lucille Talusen, CBN News, Tokyo.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
Before we say goodbye, take a look at this. Farm animals at St. Peter's Basilica for blessings at the Vatican Thursday. January 17th is known as the Feast of St. Anthony the Abbot, who was the patron saint of domestic animals. What a beautiful sight there. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you right back here on Monday. Goodbye, everybody. God bless.